Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, first of all, I'm going to link this in the description below, but I've got another Substack up at theamericanclassroom.substack.com. It is titled, Child Trafficking and the DOE. Does the Department of Education facilitate child trafficking while taxpayers help fund it? I think we know the answer to that question. I make a couple of very basic connections, of course. There's some news headlines involved, a number of the different things, of course, that have taken place over the course of time here, and that have certainly, of course, been brought up in school board meetings within the last at least 4 plus years, certainly, again, regarding all the perversions that have been taking place. And now, of course, we're seeing numerous school boards basically completely panic as a result of these executive orders that have been signed and have to be followed now, or else lose federal funding. And some of these school boards are doubling down, and they're denying these executive orders, and that's not going to work out for them. So, as I've said before, there's clearly a complaint form that anybody can fill out, which exists, again, on the Federal Department of Education's website through their particular Civil Rights Act window there. And again, if you know of a school district that is not complying, then that form should be filled out and sent into the federal government so that a letter can be written and immediately sent off to that school district. And this is already happening, which is a very good thing. But I also make a particular connection here too, which is a rather obvious one, I think, and it has to do with Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell. Robert Maxwell was directly involved not just with Israel and Mossad intelligence and blackmail operations, but he was interested, of course, in the media, and he wanted to become a massive media mogul. And in the middle of all of that, he basically, again, reached out to the United States and sought to acquire Macmillan Publishing, which ended up joining with McGraw-Hill. And anybody who's ever taught school knows that McGraw-Hill and Macmillan Publishing were huge textbook companies, and they published essentially every single K-12 subject that you can possibly imagine. This, of course, was also a part of the giant brainwashing operation that was taking place as well. Evil propaganda controlling what individuals see, what they read, what they learn, what they teach, of course, even for teachers. And it just became, again, a massive brainwashing business, and it was remarkably effective. I don't think your average American, let alone average school teacher, would ever be able to make those connections and fully understand, again, that the entire operation and idea, rather, of Mossad, along with, of course, CIA, MI6, and all of that, is specifically designed, again, to manipulate individuals. This would be a difficult pill, I think, for them to swallow. But even so, at the end of that particular section, you're going to find a video that's about 54 minutes long, give or take. And it's an interview with Gordon Thomas. And Gordon Thomas was at least the author of one book about Robert Maxwell, which is, again, remarkably interesting. And there's an avenue in that interview also where Gordon Thomas is bringing up the Promise software. Now, there's absolutely no way I'm going to get this right. And numerous books have been written about the Promise software and what it meant and what it is. But I want to read you this description here. Again, this is just your basic internet description of this, and certainly its connections to Robert Maxwell. Again, it says that he was allegedly involved in the distribution of a modified version of the Promise software, PROMIS, which was originally developed by Inslaw Incorporated. It says this software was reportedly bugged and used for mass spying by the Israeli government. Maxwell is believed to have acted as a conduit for selling the software to various national governments and financial institutions, including the Soviet Union and Sandia National Laboratories in the United States. It says the FBI opened a counterintelligence investigation into Maxwell and his company, which I believe is pronounced Pergamon International, after being contacted by employees at Sandia National Laboratories regarding Maxwell's access to government databases. The investigation was closed by the FBI after the NSA showed apparent lack of interest in the matter, but the specifics of the database and NSA's involvement remain classified. Here's one of the reasons why. In the video, they describe how this particular software apparently had a backdoor that was intentional in order for other foreign governments to basically access other governments' information. The reason, again, that I make the connection between the Department of Education, child trafficking, and this, I think should be rather obvious, certainly in the technocratic state, so to speak, that the education business operates in now. Again, back then you had Maxwell running a major education publishing company, which is, of course, going out to numerous schools. And at the exact same time, he has access to other governments' information, which children have to be a part of that to some extent. And then again, at the exact same time, the way that it operates today in American K-12 schools is you have endless individuals using Google platforms, and they're using foreign platforms and foreign technological platforms, which have students' personal information on it. You have to understand that those platforms also have backdoors that are specifically designed for those companies to access children's information. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Now, of course, on all of their websites, of course, including Google and their terms of service and everything else, in not so many terms, they always say, well, your data is private. All of your data is private, and we don't share it with any second or third party or whatever. There's absolutely no way that that's the case, and I've been over on the show as to why that's the case. If you have a higher bidder who, again, does a fake ransomware attack on any of these technology companies that have direct ties to American schools, then those companies, those tech companies, are going to adhere to that fake ransomware attack. And again, it's basically just an excuse for them to continue to distribute children's information, phone numbers, email addresses, home addresses, maybe a picture of them, because again, a lot of these programs have pictures of these children on those computer programs. Again, your school photo, a child's school photo, is uploaded onto the internet, then it's on the internet. And certainly, again, if it's going through a particular computer program that a specific school is using, you'd better believe that those foreign companies are getting all of that information. This is a huge problem. And again, this is not something that your average American school teacher or administrator is thinking about nor caring about. And maybe they're getting paid a little extra to not think or care about it. Now, again, the Promise software specifically had a great deal to do, of course, with espionage and murder for hire and spy organizations and things of that nature. Again, in today's world, why would such software not exist? And why would it not have information regarding children and child trafficking? Certainly in the one environment, as I say in the article, where the vast majority of children congregate, and the vast majority of brainwashed parents believe that their children are safe within these environments, because the school district tells them so, of course. So again, I understand that these are leaps for some people to make, and that, a person could basically say, well, this isn't direct ties to child trafficking, but it's more indirect. Well, that may be, but even so, it's still an indirect connection. And then, of course, like I say very superficially, although very perverse, you look at the actual practices of what goes on within American K-12 schools, and why is that happening, of course? Why is all of the sexual grooming being allowed to take place within these environments? It's doing this, of course, to weaken the child and to confuse them. And a weakened and confused child is exactly the kind of child who can be trafficked. Not to mention, whenever it was 2-3 years ago, I wrote that article again having to do with how illegal aliens are going to help bring down the education system. That's happening also. And every single governor that moved, illegal aliens from one state to the next, including, of course, DeSantis and Abbott and everybody else, when they were throwing them all in buses and tossing them up north, and then all of a sudden they were getting out, in South Dakota or wherever they were, Missouri, Nebraska, you name it. These individuals, again, were being trafficked by our own governors. Now, again, like I said in the last episode, I thought it was rather disgusting that James Comer, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the House, that he was basically sort of whitewashing the entire issue regarding that and saying, well, we're not here to criticize the governor of Florida and we're not here to criticize the governor of Texas and whatever else. Well, as it turns out, everybody's to blame here, because the American government has been involved in child trafficking for a very long time. The only statement I'm making here is if the pool or the pond, so to speak, that has the most fish in it for the predators, which we know is American K-12 schools, why would they also not be engaging in child trafficking and moving money around and having that money change hands from one NGO to the next that all again has their fingers in the cookie jar of the Department of Education? They would certainly have to. So just wanted to make mention of that. Again, the article is out there. I highly recommend, again, sending it even to somebody that you know that is still in the business, and just move it their way and say, hey, have you read about this yet? Have you seen this yet? And again, they probably haven't. But you don't have to say that you know who I am or that I was the person who wrote it. You don't have to bring up any of that. Just, text it to them or email it to them, something along those lines, and see how they respond. But again, I'll link that in the description below if anybody's interested in moving that around or taking a look at it. Okay. Again, the Department of Education was not abolished over the weekend or certainly on Friday, which is kind of what I was hoping. But it will be eventually, and if not this week, then certainly in due time. But in the long game, which I also bring up in the article, is that you're going to need at least 60 votes in the Senate in order to abolish it completely. The executive order helps, but we shouldn't look for the full abolishment of the Department of Education until, at least I would say, the next midterm election. And we have to win more seats in the Senate, again, to acquire at least 60 or 61 in order for that to be the case and for it to go up for another vote. And then that would be the end of it. But I think one of the things that's going to happen is that this is going to move into different departments. It's still going to be managed appropriately. The states, of course, have more responsibility now, and certainly over the next year and a half, you're going to see these states, again, start to work a lot of things out. There's going to be a lot of infighting, probably some, more protests, maybe even some stupid strikes with some of these dummies not knowing what they're doing, and just sort of, going along with the latest trend. And then eventually, you might end up winning some Democrat votes, potentially, as a result of their own states figuring out that they can, in fact, handle the load here because it's really not that difficult. Again, the problem is that when you stop a department like this, it's inevitable that you're going to look at the money. And you're going to look at the money that has been stopped, and then, of course, where that money was going in the past. That's really what the panic is all about. Which, as I say in the article also, that's what Doge is all about. Doge is military intelligence. And the people barking about it, again, are looking at it at face value and blaming Elon Musk for everything. He's taken the slings and arrows and the name-calling. But again, that's also, in my belief, that's a sort of a purposeful distraction. That's part of that plan, is to have him take the blame, the slings and the arrows, when in fact, this is really military intel, and these individuals don't want any of these agencies to be shut down because, like I said, once they do, you have to look at the money, and you have to look at who was receiving the money and how much money were they receiving, again, under the guise of an alleged contract, which probably wasn't really going to the thing that it was supposed to be going to in the first place. And speaking of that, this was rather funny. On Friday, after I aired the episode, in fact, it was Thursday, my apologies, when I got done recording the episode and I was talking about Justice Alito's determination on the temporary restraining order for $2 billion regarding a USAID contract. As soon as I mentioned that, and as soon as the Supreme Court ruled, it wasn't 24 hours later, or again, practically the next day, another lower court federal judge overruled the initial decision that was made by another radical judge regarding taking off the temporary restraining order for that money so that the money could still flow. So another federal judge intervened and said, no, it gets to stop. There gets to be a temporary restraining order. They get to examine the contract, and if the executive branch wants the contract done away with, then they have the right to do that. So that could have been one of the reasons why the Supreme Court denied it. But again, in Alito's dissent, that's essentially what he was saying. He was saying a lower court needs to handle this, but allowing a radical court to make a decision for the entire nation is kind of a bad precedent and a bad idea. Which again is why he disagreed with the other court justices who, again, wanted the money to keep flowing, all based on some preconceived timeline. So yeah, the point is things are moving quick. And things are reversing themselves quickly. And it's funny watching the public outrage on particular things because their outrage is sometimes pointed in the wrong direction. And then all of a sudden, a different decision gets made, and then there you have it. So, again, everything is flip-flopping on a constant basis because this is the Civil War. And this is happening again throughout the entire judicial system in our country right now, which is really fascinating to watch, I think. So, there's that. I have to mention this. This is from last week also, and I found this hearing to be really eye-opening and a bit odd at the exact same time. There was a Senate Judiciary hearing on quote-unquote anti-Semitism on college campuses, okay? And the room was packed to the brim with Jews. And what was funny was that a lot of the questions, again, they were trying to divide the I don't know, the panel, so to speak. And there were at least 3 of them on this panel, all Jewish. And then, of course, everybody behind them is primarily Jewish also. A lot of applauding that was taking place in XYZ. It's interesting watching the different dynamics of these Jewish individuals basically not, well, how would I put this? They're not all agreeing. I'll just put it that way. They don't all agree. Now, as you might expect, every senator asking these questions, they were saying things like, do you agree that students who are on student visas should have their visas revoked if they engage in a violent act and break the law against a Jewish student? It was a common question that was asked throughout the entire thing. And what's funny is if you just ask that question again, but you take out Jewish student, the answer is yes. I mean, the answer is still yes, but it really has nothing to do with attacking Jewish students. If anybody who is here on a student visa, that means that they are not a lawful citizen. If they break a law, regardless of who it is against, the answer is yeah, they should be deported. That's the whole point. Again, this entire anti-Semitism on college campuses psychological operation, for lack of a better phrase, and social engineering experiment that's been taking place here, it has less to do with students going after other Jewish students, and it has more to do with individuals just breaking the law and engaging in disorderly conduct, and potentially felonies depending on the level of vandalism. That's essentially it. But as I've said in the past, anybody who sends their children to these Ivy League brick and mortar schools where all of this is taking place, which are all communistic anyway, I mean, they've got a couple of screws loose, and that's putting it mildly. But even so, what was funny is the one thing that a lot of these panelists agreed with was the way that Palestinians were being treated by the Jewish government. And that was interesting because even some of the senators were going, okay, they seem to understand that the Jewish government is persecuting innocent individuals in Gaza and the West Bank and what have you. So we'll give them that much. And that's basically what they were saying. And that was also one of the questions that was asked is, can you be pro-Palestine and still be somebody who is Jewish and still want, I don't know, freedom for them or whatever else? And the answer was yes for a lot of them. They were all like, oh yeah, we fully understand that persecution of any kind, regardless of who it's against, is a bad thing. That's what a lot of them were saying, which was interesting because it took back a lot of the senators. They were just like, oh, wow, we thought these all would have been Palestinian-bashing individuals. And, I mean, they weren't. But some of them, again, were basically saying, look, you can't throw somebody out of the country because you think that they go after a Jew. But you can throw somebody out of a country because they break the law. That's allowed, and you should be able to do that. Some of the senators were like, well, wait a minute, but what about Jews? And it's just like, settle down. It has more to do with breaking the law than it does who they're breaking the law against or toward or what have you. And if you've seen, again, any of those protests, if that's what you want to call them, or rallies or whatever, laws are being broken. Again, you can't. It doesn't matter who it's in favor of or against or how they're dressed or whatever else. If it was anybody and they were occupying a building or keeping people from entering a building or throwing furniture through windows or barricading doors or whatever they're doing. If anybody was doing that, regardless of what race you were, you would be breaking the law. And in this country, if you're an illegal and you're breaking the law, well, you need to go home then. And if you're here on any papers of any kind, well then yeah, those papers should be stripped. So my analysis of the whole thing is rather, I think, middle of the road. And I hope objective. It has less to do with going after Jews, and it has more to do with just breaking the law. It's like when somebody says hate speech, and they say that stupid term, which is completely made up. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. There is just freedom of speech. If you get your feelings hurt and you don't like it, too bad. But there's no hate speech. Just like, again, there's no anti-Semitism on college campuses. It doesn't exist. There are just people who disagree with other people. So I'll just kind of leave it at that, but it was an odd hearing. But it was interesting, again, to listen to some of these younger Jewish individuals basically say, look, we know that bad stuff is happening in Palestine to innocent Palestinians, and that's not cool. I mean, that was refreshing to actually hear within this committee. But anyway, again, I just wanted to make mention of that because already a lot of these Ivy League schools have lost hundreds of millions. I believe Columbia has too. Because again, they're not looking at their student body and just saying, go to class. Just go to class. That's all you have to do. Just wake up, put your pants on, go to class, sit in class, listen to some dimwit tell you about their opinion for whatever 2 hours, and then go back home. That's all really people have to do. But they're Marxist playgrounds, and they're communist playgrounds. And we know who created Marxism and communism, and we know where that stems from. So, yeah, the irony is thick here, but we can read through it, and I hope that people, read between the lines. It kind of matters here. And speaking of even that, this right here is, again, a story that hardly anybody's talking about, which has to do with the thousands of Christians that are being slaughtered in Syria right now. Again, depending on the news outlet in which you subscribe to, so to speak, or pay attention to, they're having a lot of interesting times here playing with the wording of what's actually going on. Now, here's what we know about Syria, just very briefly. The Assad, I wouldn't even call it a regime, his presidency, when he was there, again, along with his wife and their family and their young kids, he was a Christian sympathizer. He was one of these, again, Muslims who basically just wanted everybody to get along and leave each other alone, so to speak. Unfortunately, Syria's been a playground for Israel and Mossad and the CIA, certainly dating back at, well, who knows how long, a very long time, but certainly during Obama's time. And Obama wanted him overthrown. And this, of course, goes all the way back to the fake biological weapons attacks that they were claiming were being used on children and, spraying the children in the face with hoses. And then you would see on film them wiping the faces of these kids with hoses as all the kids are crying. I've brought it up on the show before, not to mention if you got hosed in the face and had some adult rubbing your nose back and forth on your face while you're being dumped with water, you'd be crying too. So would I. Sure doesn't feel very good, certainly not if you're a kid. Either way, all of that was fake, and none of that was real, and that was done again in order to stoke the flames of war and create another false flag and overturn a government. Anytime a government is overturned, you have child trafficking, of course, and then you have religious persecution and murder. And that, unfortunately, is what is taking place over there right now. Christians are being pulled out of their homes. Again, endless footage of this exists. I put it on my Gab account. It was on Disclosed TV. They're being asked to walk like dogs on their hands and knees, and then they're being shot in the head. Point blank range by, again, the so-called ISIS members, who we know, again, are receiving money from Israel. And Israel receives its money from where? Us. That's how the money changes hands. Money goes to Ukraine from us, and then Ukraine gives it to Israel, and then Israel does what they do in Syria. So again, depending on the news outlet in which you're reading, they're playing with the words a little bit regarding some of these titles. For example, here's BBC. It says Syrian security forces accused of killing hundreds or upwards of 1,000 individuals. Now again, that's the BBC. Here's Newsweek. It says hundreds of minorities, including Christians, killed in Syria. This is Euronews. Over 600 killed in Syria as security forces battle pro-Assad fighters. Security forces. That's an interesting way of calling them IDF soldiers, or calling them again, Israeli-funded Muslims, so to speak. Here's Al Jazeera. Dozens reported killed as Syrian forces and pro-Assad fighters clash. This was Sky News. They left nobody. More than 1,000 people killed in some of Syria's, and then, sorry, it cuts off there. I'm just looking at, again, Brave Browser's titles here regarding these news headlines. Here's another one, the persecution and genocide of Christians in the Middle East. And then, of course, leave it to CNN to completely get it wrong and flip it upside down. Here was their title, Syrian government loyalists accused of executing civilians as violence erupts. Again, they don't take a stand other than trying to make it sound like it's pro-Assad individuals killing Christians. That's not true. They're not pro-Assad individuals killing Christians. These are, again, Muslim radicals who are being paid by the IDF and Israel. And, of course, because there are Christians who live there, that's one of the reasons why this story isn't getting a lot of press, even though, again, it's one quick article on some of these sites, but that's really about it. And unfortunately, the United States is, taking kind of a very bland approach to this. This was from the U.S. State Department on March 9th. Statement by Secretary Marco Rubio. The escalation of fighting and civilian deaths in Syria. Quote, the United States condemns the radical Islamist terrorists, including foreign jihads, that murdered people in western Syria in recent days. It says the United States stands with Syria's religious and ethnic minorities, including its Christian, Druze, Alawite, and Kurdish communities, and offers its condolences to the victims and their families. Syria's interim authorities must hold the perpetrators of these massacres against Syria's minority communities accountable, unquote. Yeah, good luck with that. Again, this is unfortunately one of the things that Marco Rubio probably supported back in the day, but because he's been neutered and now controlled, he has to take a back seat while other things take place. So, I don't know. It's not good. And anytime, like I said, these countries get overthrown, it's complete and utter chaos. And this is unfortunately, again, where Israel loves to use tax dollars that it receives from us to basically get whatever they want and expand their land, among other things. So, again, for everybody out there, or anybody out there screaming that Vladimir Putin's one of the bad guys, as it turns out, he's not. He's resettled at least 8,000 Syrian families in Russia, and again, feeding them and giving them shelter and all of that, while of course their own country isn't doing that, and if they were to stay there, they would most certainly get slaughtered. Of course, one of the other disgusting parts is that the individuals who claim to be Christians here in the United States don't say anything about any of this. Again, unfortunately, a lot of individuals believe that if an individual lives in the Middle East, and Syria, by the way, is a heavily Christian country, that just because they have darker skin, there's no way they can be Christian, and that we should support Israel in all their endeavors no matter what. Again, those are only the Schofield Bible evangelicals and evangelists that actually believe any of that nonsense. So it's a sad state of affairs, but it also should show people exactly who owns the media in the United States, and we know who they are. Okay, a couple other things again, and just really a couple of observations regarding some of Trump's speeches here, certainly at the end of last week and over the weekend. First of all, he signed an executive order going after not just Perkins Coie, the law firm, who hired Christopher Steele to write the fake Russia dossier, which of course was used in an effort to overthrow Donald Trump and keep him from getting elected and a number of other things, and then, of course, potentially prosecute him. But he's going after other law firms as well with that specific executive order. At least 15 or 20 others, I believe, is what one of his assistants said. This is a fantastic thing. This opens the door again to all of these law firms ultimately being shut down. Again, the amount of documentation that would be acquired from these law firms that have not just gone after Donald Trump, but endless other Americans is going to be a treasure trove, the likes of which I don't think people can possibly imagine. You're talking about serious espionage. Of course, involving our own government. I mean, that should go without saying. CIA, FBI, three-letter agencies, you can pick one. But it's beyond gross. And of course, at the exact same time, and this should show everybody the level of illegality and criminality that takes place with these individuals and these law firms, is that the Oxford, Michigan school district, of course, if you recall a while back, this would have been approximately a year ago, hired Perkins Coie to protect that school district, certainly from lawsuits, potentially again from the parents who lost children at the hands of Ethan Crumbley, but also, of course, any other citizen who decides to file suit against the school district for full-blown negligence, breach of contract, and a number of other things. Again, it was the school itself that was responsible outside of Ethan Crumbley. And yet, school officials are not in jail. The parents are still in jail, and they didn't do anything, but they were actually on the outside of this entire situation looking in. If you were to draw a line or order of operations, so to speak, it would be Ethan Crumbley committed the crime, but who was next to Ethan Crumbley while that crime was being committed who had their hands on Ethan Crumbley's property? And as it turns out, the last people to do that were the school district officials. At the very least, it was the counselor and then, of course, one of their administrators who was actually in possession of his bag, who, as we know, didn't fall through with the process for when someone again, is making suspicious drawings in their journal about wanting to shoot people and all of the gun-related comments that had been made or drawings that he was making that even his teachers were finding. You would have to go through his backpack. But this, again, is why Perkins Coie was hired, because this is what Perkins Coie does. They defend the guilty. And they even go so far as to, again, help make up crimes and pay people to help make up crimes that aren't actually even there. Yeah, if I was a lawyer at Perkins Coie, I'd be resigning right quick, because digging your heels in when the DOJ is now looking right in your direction, I think that's a huge mistake, but that's just my 2 cents. There was this other topic, again, it was a rather interesting comment that Trump made, I believe in that exact same Oval Office press conference there where he was signing a couple of executive orders, but he was asked about Iran again. And he basically said again that he believes that there might be some kind of a deal or something worked out. And he was, again, doing the art of the deal. He was being vague. He wasn't being specific as to what he was talking about, but there's this prevailing belief. And certainly, again, a lot of people sort of trying to break this down and seeing what's going to happen here, that he might actually do some kind of an oil deal with Iran. And that there might be, again, some kind of a Middle Eastern oil deal that takes place with the participation of Iran. That would be interesting. Again, whether it be oil, cash, something. But it would be something that would not make the Israeli government happy. Because again, if you've paid attention to certainly the last few years, the previous government and fake administration would lead you to believe that everybody who lives in Iran is the biggest problem on the face of the planet. We can't let them have nukes, can't have them do this, can't have them do that. Israel's always our friend, and that's the way that it just needs to be. But I think something else is going on here. And it really is, I wouldn't call it a tick, but it's certainly a specific characteristic that Donald Trump has, which again is the art of the deal. He'll just be very vague, and he'll say things like, well, let's just wait and see what happens. We'll see what happens. Or he'll simply say, I don't know anything about that, or I haven't heard that, or Well, we're talking and we're communicating, but we'll see what happens. He doesn't tell people what's really going on, because when you tell people what's going on, everybody then knows. Assuming, again, a person is telling the truth about a particular situation or a back and forth. So by leaving it vague, it basically leaves every option on the table, confuses everybody, causes people to do and say things that they might not want to do or say, exposes a great deal of people in the process. And then, of course, if a deal actually gets made that's a peaceful deal of some kind, well, somebody's going to end up on the raw end of that stick. And in this case, if it's Israel, great, because that's kind of the idea here. So I don't know what's going to happen with any of that, but it should be interesting. There was also this, and I don't know if a lot of people caught this either, but I find this to be just beyond bizarre. Sort of in a good way, I think. Again, this is a very superficial analysis of this, so forgive me, but I'm by no means any kind of a cryptocurrency expert. I actually know zero about it, which again has me a bit suspicious that maybe it just doesn't mean anything. Maybe it's always been money laundering. Maybe it's always been fraudulent. And there's been so many people that have been wrapped up in it that putting them all in prison would be next to impossible. So what's the next best thing you can do? You streamline cryptocurrency to be backed by gold. And if our paper currency is backed by gold and cryptocurrency is backed by gold, then gold is ultimately the currency that is being used. Might have different names, might have different looks, might be different groups and companies that are running it instead of, again, a centralized Federal Reserve. But at the very least, it would be backed by gold. So that's my 2 cents on that. But with that said, he had, a sort of a Bitcoin cryptocurrency roundtable, so to speak, where he signed an executive order basically saying that cryptocurrency would be backed by gold. At least that was my interpretation. I also find this interesting because the timing and the placement is remarkably odd. At the beginning of that roundtable, and he did it again in the Oval Office beforehand, he had the president of FIFA, the soccer organization, the global soccer organization, and that tournament, which of course is going to be taking place in the United States. He had him and the trophy itself in the Oval Office and then in the middle of the table during this roundtable meeting with these cryptocurrency dudes. And the actual trophy itself looks like a Bitcoin, or it looks like a giant gold plate. And then there's a golden key that you cram in the back of this trophy and you twist it, and then it twists around into basically a globe. It's like, I don't know, rings all on top of each other, and then when you unlock it, all the different rings turn around and it becomes three-dimensional. It's an interesting trophy, and it's interesting that, of course, it's gold. Of course, the old FIFA trophy was small and gold, and this one is massive. But I find the imagery to be remarkably symbolic. I'll just put it that way. I have a feeling that when Trump again uses terms like the golden age, that this is the golden age of America, that is what is going to be our currency. Our currency is going to be gold. That it will all be backed by gold. That yes, it's going to be, again, a paper currency backed by gold. It might be a digital currency backed by gold, Bitcoin backed by gold, what have you. But we already have digital currency because, of course, we have digital banking. So by making everything backed by gold, I don't think you're taking away paper currency. You're just streamlining all these different fraudulent forms of currency, and you're making them all the same now. Again, I don't view that as being a bad thing. If that eliminates all of the fraud financially across the board because everything now has to be backed by gold, then so be it. I view that as potentially being a very positive thing. I just also find the symbolism and the word usage to be not an accident and be very on purpose. So I think, again, good stuff is happening. I understand people complaining about, the technocratic state and always bringing that up and being a sore spot for a great deal of people. And same thing again with digital currency, always being a sore spot, and rightfully so. Again, people don't want digital currency because, again, they don't want government to all of a sudden turn it off. And then you can't access your money. That's, of course, the long-term fear. And then, of course, your bank account gets drained because government decides that they don't like what you say or how you behave or something you write or whatever it may be. That's, again, sort of the long communistic plan that was always associated with that. The thing that I would encourage people to consider is that the good guys knew that that was the case, and that it's possible that all of this is being flipped on its head again to disrupt what the bad guys had in place in order for now the good guys to basically take over and say, well, we're going to move forward with this, whether you like it or not. Again, you can go to jail if you'd like and continue to try to do the things that you want to do. But at the end of the day, we're still going to move forward. Gold's going to be the currency. Americans can use any kind of currency that they want. They can use paper. They can use coins. They can, use this, use that. If they, again, want to scan their phone, they can do that too. But, if multiple options isn't a bad thing. It's like when people flipped out when Donald Trump said that they're going to stop minting the penny. Well, people don't use pennies, by and large. And it costs more to make them than it does not make them. So we're saving money in that regard, but people, again, viewed that as, well, this is just another step toward digital currency and we're all going to be a slave and, they're getting rid of the penny, oh my God. I don't panic regarding any of that. I just don't think it's that big of a deal. And I think, again, that if we can imagine and, of course, write plenty of books and articles about the business of that being a horrible option for the future, again, for a total government control over our currency thing, I don't know how that's good for any business. I don't know how that works out for anybody. Again, I understand that Amazon One exists. I brought that up in a previous episode where you use your hand, the palm of your hand to pay for things because it's like using your fingerprint. I don't think we have to use that. I don't know anybody who wants to use that. Hell, I don't know anybody who even knows about it, let alone a place that actually implements such a thing. So we have options is the whole point. And I think that we're going to continue to have options. But if our currency is backed by gold, what currency we use is up to us. I don't think that's going to be up to government per se, because we still have a say in things, whether people believe it or not. Okay, I'm going to move that to the side here. Education stuff, and there's a few things in some audio as well. I'm going to get into the Amish children story here in just a minute, where the state of New York is now forcing the Amish to inject their children with vaccinations, or face up, upwards of $180,000 in fines, apparently. Trust me, I'll get to that here in just a minute, but again, regarding all of the money mismanagement and the money changing hands and Doge being implemented, and of course states being forced to do things now for the first time that they've never done regarding education, there's this locally. Again, out of WLWT Channel 5, NBC, Cincinnati, Ohio, it was titled, Trump Slashed Teacher Training, Citing DEI. Educators say the grants fought staff shortages. Now, we know what that means. They were hiring individuals who weren't qualified to be there in the first place, hence the DEI. And now, of course, they have to get rid of these people and actually look for more competent, qualified, certified individuals to fill these positions. This is a problem for these environments, of course. It's not a problem for people like me because I love this kind of stuff. I love the fact that these schools are having to clean house. And again, all of their COVID money and COVID mismanagement and their higher salaries for administrators, all of this is getting exposed. So let me play again this piece of audio that goes along with this news story. This is back on March 6th. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
On February 14th, the Federal Department of Education sent out a letter telling schools that receive federal funding that DEI programs must end. The department claiming that although those programs may appear neutral, they are motivated by racial considerations, and race-based decision-making remains impermissible. In response, the National Education Association and the New Hampshire chapter have filed suit in federal court. The letter dramatically disrupts plaintiffs' ability to provide education to students in accordance with professional requirements and best practices. The suit claims, as an example, that several New Hampshire teachers are worried about what this means for their classes. That includes a high school English teacher who teaches literature that includes topics on race and gender. It says he's worried about potential risk of investigation, discipline, or adverse employment action. To that end, the suit claims the original letter imposes vague and viewpoint discriminatory prohibitions on schools. The suit also says the Department of Education encroaches on teaching and academic freedom, and the DEI prohibition is contrary to another law stating that federal employees are not authorized to mandate, direct, review, or control a state and local education agency, instructional content, curriculum, and related activities. The concerns also go beyond the classroom. The suit saying that teachers don't know if they can offer special events that celebrate different cultures, language, or religion. Asking the court to vacate the letter, the suit also claims it's a violation of constitutional rights. It's unclear when or if the federal court will take up the suit or issue an injunction.
The way that school teachers react to the law is so funny. I mean, it makes me laugh every single time. I can't get enough of it. I find it absolutely amazing. They always take sort of this childish approach to things, and they just say, well, how am I supposed to do anything then? And they just leap to the most absurd explanation. Well, how am I supposed to do my job? Again, a teacher complaining about a book that they're using and actually panicking, so they say, into potentially being investigated for using a particular book that discusses race. You mean a school teacher has to use a different book for the first time in their life? Weird. Again, it doesn't mean that you can't use a particular book or teach a particular lesson. That's not what this means. It means stop being gay and retarded. That's all. This isn't tough. Do you have a book that your students are reading in class that have to do with different genders other than the two that exist, or talk about queer couples or this, that, or the other? If you do, then get rid of it and find another book, preferably nonfiction, preferably something that's historically accurate, and preferably something that's a little more wholesome, or something that tells the truth rather than playing pretend. But again, this is what the gay retards in this business all end up doing. They just, again, leap to an absurd explanation or rationalization for their own behavior, show everybody how gay and retarded they are, scream and shout and do everything that they do, and then they play the victim. Well, does this mean that I'm not allowed to take a field trip to the gay museum? Yes, that's exactly what it means. I don't know if gay museum exists. Sure it does someplace, but either way, I mean, the answer is yes, you can't do that anymore. And if parents know that you're still doing it, well, then that's a complaint to the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Education, and then a firm letter gets written from them, sent to the school district, saying that it's come to their attention that your school district is still adhering to your old policies that are violating law now, or certainly an executive order, which is law to some extent, and then you need to adhere to that. And if you don't, well, you're going to lose money. Again, this is not difficult. This isn't tough, but it's tough for these people because they believe and have been brainwashed into believing that that's their job. That their job is to teach their feelings and their belief system. That's not it. That was never the job, never supposed to be the job, not in the slightest. In fact, on this DEI train, since I'm on it right now, let me play this piece of audio. This was sent to me by Sandy Adams or Jesse James, one of the two, from Rochester, Michigan. And it's a back and forth that takes place between a board member and the board president after a group of parents, and this was from weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember seeing these parents coming up to the microphone before, but they came up to the microphone during this board meeting immediately after that that memo went out from the Federal Department of Education regarding DEI. That based on this executive order signed by the president, you have to get rid of all of this now, and if you don't, we can start to complain and you'll lose federal funding and whatever. And as we know, there are school districts all over the place that are not adhering to the executive order. They're seeking to reword their current policies, or they're just flat out openly on the record denying it whatsoever. So let me play this first back and forth. Again, this is between certainly a staunch leftist who's the president of this school board in Rochester, Michigan, and then one of the other female board members who, again, looks at the president and says, hey, look, we need to change our policy here. We shouldn't just reverse what we were doing and go back to the way that things were. We need to write a new policy that says we are adhering to this, and then we need to adhere to this, and then list exactly what that means so that everybody understands, so that we don't lose federal funding and people don't start filing complaint forms. Again, this is, I mean, that makes sense, but the board president is having none of it because she's a psycho. So give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
I'd like to remind the audience, please, that we be respectful when we are in this meeting. And we will have, for those of you who had some questions, we will be getting back to some of you with answers on those. As far as some of the Title IX, we did revert back to our prior administrative regulations on those, and that was effective February 17th. I think we're still in the midst of getting that updated on the website, but those are in effect.
Madam President?
Trustee Lacouille, this is not
I do have a question about what just came up in public comment.
No, you can talk about that in your comments at the end.
According to Robert's rules, trustees are allowed to ask questions about items that are on the agenda.
But
this would be a violation of parliamentary procedure to not allow me to ask a question about the agenda item.
In our handbook, it specifically identifies that the superintendent and the president are able to respond at that time, but it is not appropriate for anyone else at that time.
Madam President, I'm not responding to community members. I'm asking you a question about what came up in public comment. It does not say in our board handbook any rule that prohibits trustees from asking questions about agenda items. I'm asking you a question about an agenda item.
But the agenda item is the public comment at this point.
Exactly.
So
I'm
I have no
asking you
comment
about
on
what
this.
came up, because I'm hearing that a citizen is planning to file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights.
Right,
And I'm
which was
wondering if the district understands what kind of an undertaking that is and how that puts our funding at risk, how we have to draw up all kinds of policies and emails and records, and there's interviews and there's site visits, and it could be very costly, could result in withholding of funding. And unfortunately, we have evidence for a valid complaint to be made. And I'm wondering if we ought to agree that maybe we should put together a policy that is in compliance with the law. Because what we have right now is not a policy. We're just updating administrative regulations to what we had before. But we have never had a policy that addresses what happens in bathrooms and locker rooms or on sports teams. And that's what has been asked for. They're asking for a policy, which is something that we do not currently have. The OCR frowns on that. They will write you up if you don't have proper policies, and I'd like to make sure that the district is in compliance with what's expected.
Trustee Lacouille, what I would like to say is that you are welcome to talk with your fellow board members to see if there is consensus to bring that up. You can talk to the people who are on the
she doesn't care. She doesn't want to do it.
Curriculum committee as well, and look to put that on a future agenda.
All right, well, so I move that the board discusses putting a policy in place.
Trustee Lacouille, you are not recognized, and it's not germane at this time.
And we consider possible action at the next meeting.
We're moving on to agenda item 7.0, which is the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered routine in nature by the Board of Education and will be acted upon by one motion. There's no separate discussion of these items. If any member of the board requests discussion of an item, that item will be removed.
You heard another guy's voice there. He was the one sort of doing this whatever. He was talking over the meeting on his own YouTube channel. Black Conservative, I believe, is his channel. Anyway, what's interesting about it, and the board member makes a great point, is she, again, looks at the board president and she says, what are you doing? You're making work. You're making more work for everybody. And she's 100% right. And it's a valid concern. She's basically saying, again, you're going to have all these individuals do all this extra work that they don't want to do. They're going to have to produce every single thing that they've ever done and that they are doing. They're going to have to create all this documentation. That, of course, is going to be the responsibility of the treasurer, the superintendent, other board members, certainly the board president herself, and she doesn't even know this, building administrators, right down to school teachers. They're going to have to, again, create endless paperwork and respond to the civil rights violation. Again, you don't make work. Just follow the law. But these people are digging in. We knew they'd do this. I said that they would do this. They are this dumb. They're not going to follow executive orders, and if it becomes law, they will violate it. There are endless districts out there that will. Let me give you another one. This was from Wisconsin. I put this one, this particular clip again up on my Gab account and X account. Again, this is a back and forth among board members where they're basically, again, going around the horn and they're saying, I just don't think I can vote for this. I can't vote to change our policy away from DEI. Not going to do it. Again, these people, they couldn't be gayer if they tried. Give this one a listen in 3, 2, 1.
I am not interested in canceling programs that celebrate the rich diversity of this district and of this community, or programs that prepare our children for the realities of this world. What I am not interested in is the curtailment of active advocacy and searches for a qualified, diverse workforce. I am voting no on this one. There is nothing right about this in the spirit of civil rights, civil disobedience when called for. This is one that requires me to say hell no. So I just want to make that clear to fellow board members. That's my position.
I just want to say publicly that I deplore the behavior that we have been witnessing throughout our country and the senseless, mindless decimation of our federal government. And now we see it in the Department of Education. And now it comes home to our own schools and to our own district. I deplore it. I hate this.
Lynn, I'm on the same page. This stinks. This takes away local control. There's $40 million invested in it, and this is absolutely atrocious that this has to come up. I'm going to plug my nose. I'm going to vote in favor of it, and I'm going to hope that we continue to do the work that we've been doing.
We have a threatening letter, which is illegal. I just don't know that I'm ready to fold tonight off of this letter that is not attached to any law that says funding would be lost.
It is my sincere hope that the district's response to the federal government's infringement on local control of our school district is to continue to expand our outreach activities.
The clip ends there. That's Green Bay, Wisconsin, where apparently they have spent $40 million on DEI programs and DEI nonsense. There's a very interesting line in that audio, though. I hope you caught it. What you ended up having there at the end is you had a board member openly admitting that this is, according to him, federal government stripping them of their local rights. Do you see what that means? Donald Trump and the administration have tricked school boards into advocating for themselves to be self-sustainable. Whoops. Whoopsie-daisy. I thought that was the one thing that they didn't want. I thought they wanted government dependence. I thought they wanted government help all the time. I thought they wanted government to tell them what to do. And now all of a sudden, government's telling them what to do, and they don't like it. So now they want to be self-sustaining. Now they want to do their own thing. Whoopsie-daisy. See how the art of the deal works? He has these morons now advocating for the thing that they never wanted in the first place. The school system has done this regarding endless topics, time and time again. during the COVID lie, they were advocating for learning at home. Public schools actually advocating for children learning at home, online. Which means, what are they advocating for? Home learning. The thing that everybody does, or smart people do anyway, away from the entire system to begin with. Isn't that odd? This is the art of the deal. He's getting these nitwits to do the thing and advocate for the thing they never wanted. Again. It's great. I love it. I love it. They just fall for it every single time. They never learn. They absolutely never learn. This is exactly how they were supposed to behave and what they were supposed to do from day one. Don't be gay. Don't be retarded. Just teach your subject and go home. And whatever games the government plays, don't play that. Don't ever fall for any of that social engineering stuff. Just do the thing you're supposed to do. Regardless of what's on the TV or what gets discussed, just keep teaching your subject. And anything that transpires out in the realm of social media and the news and the law and whatever administration is in charge, you don't have to participate in it. Just be self-sustaining and do the right thing all the time. But they can't do that. They're political ideologues because that's the business. So let me mention this. Again, it's a bit off track here, just very, very briefly before I get into the Amish story and some jab-related things. But over the weekend, as you may be aware, and certainly at the end of last week, the social media investigator / influencer, if they would want to call themselves that, I'm not sure, Ian Carroll. Again, big account on X, over 1 million followers. Anyway, he makes a lot of these TikTok videos and did a while back and does these investigations and looks into particular things and connects dots just, rather superficially, but he does a very good job. Anyway, he, of course, was on Joe Rogan and was referencing the work of other individuals, and then people started to criticize him back and forth as to some of the things that he was saying, and some people, again, like Whitney Webb, were openly discussing, again, how Ian got a few things wrong regarding some of the books that he was referencing that she's written and whatever else. With that said, Amazing Polly put together a quick little video about 20 some odd minutes long, again describing some of the connections that Ian has and how in moments like this, certain individuals get exposed, of course, for knowing particular things and not knowing particular things, and that's not unusual. It's not unusual that when individuals sort of step outside of just making short videos and they do more long-form things, you can sort of quickly see what the individuals are aware of and what they are not aware of. There is an interesting happening, though, which takes place, which I quickly picked up on here, certainly around that same time. And it had to do with any time that an individual has a lot of followers, certainly over 1 million, on a singular platform. Not only is that individual, of course, going to basically bring a lot of attention toward them, but they're going to bring attention from a great deal of individuals who have a great deal to hide. And during the entire COVID lie, as one might imagine, there were a great deal of individuals who sought to profit from pretending as if they are on the side of freedom and standing up for the common man, when in fact they actually were just taking on that role in order to hide their previous participation in some rather nefarious things. I, of course, have brought up Simone Gold in the past for a variety of reasons. She profited off of all of that, and now her moneymaker these days, even though she's robbed plenty of people, in my humble opinion, her only moneymaker now and her only argument basically has to do with January 6th and her participation in that, which I've even caught her lying regarding all of that. That some random person put a megaphone in her hand as she was randomly thrown inside of the Capitol building, and it was all just random and happenstance. Okay. Anyway, she's not my concern anymore because she's irrelevant. The other person who is irrelevant and yet continues to show their face is Robert Malone. Dr. Robert Malone, again, was on Ian Carroll's show very recently, as Ian Carroll was talking with him and a couple of other guys who I don't know, It was a very boring conversation, the parts that I heard. In fact, very randomly, I selected one portion of their discussion, and Robert Malone was bragging about working with and knowing people who work for the Department of Defense. And his exact quote went something like this, that the one thing I love about working with the Department of Defense and for the Department of Defense and knowing people at the Department of Defense is because they make things that work. Ladies and gentlemen, the Department of Defense is engaging and has been engaging in biological warfare against us for a very long time. They are the curators and perpetuators of the wireless body area network also. This is awful. And yet Ian Carroll had him on the show, and the only reason that he did was because he doesn't know these connections regarding Robert Malone. Not to mention all of the lawsuits and the suing that Robert Malone was doing regarding anybody who didn't like him, who was questioning his own narratives and his involvement in quote-unquote mRNA and that development, and making poisons in a lab claiming that it's going to help people when in fact it doesn't. So, again, in the middle of all of this, Ian Carroll has kind of exposed himself again as to not knowing a great deal of things. The interesting part is that when a light gets turned on, the moths always rushed right toward the flame. And Robert Malone is one of those moths that just always hangs around and seeks to have influence with individuals, again, who have a large following, because Robert Malone wants to sort of repair his reputation and make it look like he's had nothing to do with anything that's ever taken place that's bad. Again, it's a bad look. It's just a bad look. Again, when you have a lot of guests on your shows and you don't vet who they are, or you don't know everything about them that you could possibly know, that can be a bad look on a show host. I talk to everyday Americans when I have them on the show here. Again, homeschooling parents, previous educators, current educators, people of that nature. I'm not going to talk to Robert Malone because I know who he is and I'm not interested in anything he has to say. Again, he was suing people for hundreds of millions of dollars because they were speaking about his past, and he doesn't want people doing that. That's very suspicious. Again, apparently Ian Carroll doesn't know any of that. It's too bad, because that's something that's gone on with Robert Malone for a very long time. So again, it's like all these wellness people come out of the woodwork, and All Family Pharma, which is now the new promoter that exists on Rumble and their platform. You don't see a lot of the wellness company anymore. It's called All Family Pharma, probably owned by the exact same people. It's ivermectin this, ivermectin that, which I guess is fine. It just depends on, again, who's distributing it and the kickbacks and all of that other stuff. So I don't know. It's an odd happening. But even, again, Ian Carroll later on came out and basically was describing how he wants to have this giant get-together in Boston, Massachusetts sometime in the early summer, like June 1st or something like that. He wants all these social media influencers to get together and meet one another and communicate and cross-pollinate and do all this other stuff. I'm not participating in any of that. I'm not interested in it. I'm not a mingler by nature. Certainly not going to mingle with other people who, might think that they do similar things than I do. I'm not interested in it. I can read for myself. I can look up information myself, analyze things myself, and, do my best to bring that information to the people who listen to this show. But there's absolutely no reason for me to rub elbows and rub noses with people like him or anybody else. It just doesn't make sense. Again, in the words of Al Capone, and you've heard me say this, and I love the quote, I'd rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies. I'd rather hang out with Jesse James and Jason Outcast over there, instead of rubbing elbows with anybody else. So that's my 2 cents on all that. I'm not going to be on some stage, with Robert Malone and Ian Carroll and these other people. I'm not interested in it. Not going to do it. So yeah, and there are a lot of other people who won't either, which is good. Again, people don't seem to understand that when you run with those crowds, if those individuals again are guilty of something, guilt by association is a very real thing. And the fact is I don't know a lot of those people, and I'm not interested in a lot of them at all. And a lot of them I do know professionally, as far as like knowing about their pasts and what they've done in the past and who they've associated with, and of course all the promo codes and the money that they make. I find it highly suspicious. So I always have and always will. And of course, Amazing Polly's put together a number of presentations highlighting this also, and she's 100% right. It's a club. It's its own club, and they cross-pollinate and they cross-promote and they do all of that other stuff that they do. But yeah, it's just, I'm not interested in it. Never have been. It's too suspicious for me. It's almost too mainstream. So anyway, with that aside, I highly recommend again watching Polly's video, but I hit her up on X to basically just remind her that he actually had Robert Malone on his show, which is embarrassing because it just shows again that Ian Carroll doesn't know who Robert Malone is and why Robert Malone is still seemingly relevant to somebody is I don't know. It's strange to me. He's stale. He just has nothing to offer anymore. And again, he has a big Substack, and a lot of people write for his Substack, probably ghostwriters, and he probably makes a copious amount of money. I don't know, writing on his Substack or having other people write on his Substack, but it's very suspicious. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. I just think it's odd. Guilt by association can be one hell of a trap. And if you don't know who you're shaking hands with, that's big trouble. One last education thing here. I don't know if you knew this or not, but we landed on the moon. At the end of last week, we sent a lunar rover or a lunar module to the moon, and it landed on the moon. Did anybody catch this? Of course, we didn't, because all that's fake, but it was the worst CGI that I've ever seen in my life. It was worse than a video game. It looked terrible. And I'm talking like an old 1990s computer video game. It was that bad. I can't believe anybody buys any of this. I really can't. It's so embarrassing. We need to doge NASA. I completely agree with the reader of my Substack who contributes to my Substack. They openly said, we've got to go to NASA and just doge the ever-living hell out of them because it's total fraud. This is, again, the aspect of the administration, certainly this current administration, that does bother me, is that we are perpetuating this space lie. I wish we wouldn't. My wish is that Donald Trump would have a press conference where, again, he would say this is going to be remarkably important, and it's one of those, 7 or 8 p.m. press conferences that happens out of the Oval Office, but it's not even a press conference. It's like a national address to the nation kind of thing. And he's sitting at the desk there, and he openly is discussing how space is a lie. We never landed on the moon. We have the documentation that proves this. We're shutting down NASA. God created Earth. That's the way that it is. You can't leave Earth. There's no leaving Earth. Everything that you've seen regarding space is fake. And, the end. Have a great day. If you're interested in proof, my recommendation is you start looking this up online. Here's a few websites where you can do that. Of course, those websites will crash. You can get on social media platforms and, here are some platforms where you can find out the truth if you're interested in XYZ. I would prefer that actually happen. But again, it's not up to government to make that decision, I guess. I mean, they should make it because it's a cost-saving decision, and it would be a huge cost-saving decision. You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars that would instantly stop being spent. Not to mention, universities would have to get rid of full-blown departments. I mean, they would have to get rid of professors. They would have to end complete courses of study that have all been fraudulent this entire time. So, yeah. It's unfortunate because it's a satanic lie. I just, I can't for the life of me figure out why people play along with it. But you can tell, again, that a great deal of people know that it's fake because they're laughing their way through it. They're joking their way through it. So, I don't know. It's really stupid as far as I'm concerned. I wish it would all stop. Because at face value, it's beyond fake and beyond embarrassing. So there you go. There's my rant on that. Okay, the Amish. God bless these people. Here's the story. And again, this is out of New York State. This is from AmishAmerica.com. It says, court, no vaccine exemption for Amish children. Amish fined $118,000. This was from March 5th. It says a federal appeals court has upheld a decision requiring Amish school children to be vaccinated in New York. These are not Amish children who attend public school. These are Amish children attending Amish-owned and operated schools. Religious objections, do not work here, according to the Second Circuit Court ruling. Manhattan. It says a New York state law requiring Amish students to receive vaccinations does not violate those students' constitutional rights, a Second Circuit panel ruled Monday. The case, which the panel heard this past November, had been brought by 3 Amish community schools that were fined in 2019 for failing to comply with state-mandated school vaccinations. The schools and Amish parents argued their First and 14th Amendment rights had been violated, as many Amish seek to live separately from the modern world and abhor vaccines, as they should, on both accounts. It says, I think abhor might be a little strong, but this point stands. Here's more on why the Amish don't vaccinate, their attorney had previously argued. It says, quote, the state has determined that it's okay to spare a child vaccination for the sake of their immune system, but it's not okay to spare a child vaccination for the sake of their soul. The plaintiff's attorney, Shannon Grammel, told the panel Monday, quote, and that's the kind of value judgment the First Amendment does not allow. It then says, New York cancels religious objections, fines Amish schools $118,000. It says New York Amish who rejected vaccination were in a good position prior to 2019. The state had previously long allowed religious objections on this matter. It says New York had, since 1966, allowed exemptions from mandatory school immunization for medical reasons or sincerely held religious objections. However, following a nationwide measles outbreak in 2018 and 19, the legislature removed those exemptions, joining 4 other states to prohibit any kind of non-medical exemption. No longer permitted this exemption, 3 Amish schools found themselves being heavily fined. Shortly after the new rule was passed, the Digert Road School, Pleasant View School, and Shady Lane School were fined tens of thousands of dollars each for violating state law after they refused to comply with the law. The schools and several board members sued the state for an injunction. Again, here it says how much were they fined. It says the court ruling and the document stated that each violation of subsection 2164 is subject to a fine of up to $2,000. The DOH considers each day that an unvaccinated student attends school to be a violation. The Commissioner of Health concluded the total fines were, quote, principled and conservative under the circumstances. It says more specifically, the Commissioner of Health's order imposed a $52,000 fine against Digert Road School, $46,000 fine against Twin Mountain School, and a $20,000 fine against Shady Lane School. To calculate the fines against Digert Road and Twin Mountains, the DOH multiplied the number of out-of-compliance students in each school by the maximum penalty, under the modest assumption that each of those students was out of compliance for only 1 day. Because Shady Lane provided no documentation for its students, the DOH assumed that 1 student was not compliant for at least 10 days. That adds up to a total of $118,000 in fines against the 3 Amish schools. Apparently, a judge recommended that the fines not be imposed, quote, due to a lack of adequate notice, unquote. But the New York State Department of Health rejected this recommendation. It goes on, it says, judges, Wisconsin versus Yoder analogies do not apply here. It says, in making their case, attorneys for the Amish attempted to use the arguments of Wisconsin versus Yoder. That was a famous Supreme Court case which enabled the Amish to limit their children's schooling to 8 grades on the basis of religious freedom. It says, from the court ruling, the parents also argue that the law is unconstitutional because it impairs Amish parents' right to control the religious upbringing of their children, as recognized in Wisconsin versus Yoder, 1972. It says the court found the analogy to the Wisconsin versus Yoder case incongruous, noting New York's vaccine rule would not, quote, forcibly remove Amish children from their community at the expense of the Amish faith or the Amish way of life. It says part of the court's argument is that the religious exemption is in some sense too broad, at least compared to the medical exemption. The court noted that the medical exemptions are typically tailored to a specific immunization, while religious exemptions apply to all vaccines. Quote, the religious exemptions sweep had a far greater ability to undermine the state's interest in preventing the spread of illness, said the court in their opinion. It says further allowing religious exemptions caused, quote, clusters of low vaccination rates and an inability to achieve herd immunity in certain communities, the court wrote. These people couldn't have it more backwards. And by these people, I mean the legal system, and certainly the state. They couldn't have it more backwards. No such thing as herd immunity. If everybody gets jabbed, that means everybody's getting sick, which means everybody's spreading the illness from being jabbed. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. What an amazing overreach this was. New York has the 5th largest Amish population at around 25,000 Amish people. Amish in multiple New York communities have been affected by the 2019 change in the law, unquote. Again, I have a couple of questions here. First of all, if they have their own school on their own property, are they receiving federal funds? I mean, if they are, then you're playing by the federal government's rules, which means, I guess if you're attending, based on the current law, the way that it is now in the state of New York, your kid has to be jabbed in order to attend school. But if the school is on your own property and you're not receiving federal funds, isn't that clearly government overreach, and isn't that completely illegal? Because again, what would keep the Amish from just turning their school into a barn and then having their students or those children in that community just go home and learn at home? Because homeschooling children don't have to be vaccinated and jabbed to the bone with all these poisons. So again, it seems like a logical workaround for the Amish would just be disassemble the buildings and then just have your children learn the material at home. Seems like it anyway. Not to mention, of course, the change in the law happened in 2019. Interesting timing. Interesting timing that you would want to force vaccinate children in 2019 in all schools. And then right around the corner was the COVID lie. It's almost like it's premeditated murder. It's almost like some legislators and some politicians and some lawmakers and whomever, certainly the medical industry in New York, knew exactly what was right around the corner. Highly suspicious. Again, they need to stick together there, without a doubt. And I know they do back each other's play, which is a fantastic thing to see. But that seems to me like a workaround, is just have them learn at home. Out of the eye of the federal government. Don't pay the fine. What are they going to do? Increase the fine on you? Are they going to stop your banking? I really don't know what they're actually going to do or what they can do, but who's to say? Continue to tax their property, maybe? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe pay the fine once and then disperse your school, like I said earlier, and just do your own thing. But yeah, I'm telling you, if they start coming after homeschooling individuals, which theoretically that's what this is, at least that's my understanding of it, but if they start coming after, again, home learning families, that's where the rubber's going to meet the road here, and the bullet's going to hit the bone, and people are going to get real pissed. And again, that's when people are going to continue to just create a mass exodus out of New York, no doubt about it. But I can't imagine anybody having children in New York State at all, and then pumping their children full of vaccination just to attend government schooling. They're going to kill their kid. And that's not good. So there's that. Okay. The brainwashing continues here. AJ Gochik sent this my way, this particular story from the Bay Area of California, where apparently masks are still being worn by people. 2 quick stories here locally. I'll tell you what, you want to get me in a completely different mood on a 180? I'll be happier than a pig in shit driving down the road, and then all of a sudden, I see a couple wearing masks inside of their car with the windows rolled up. I instantly become furious. It's it makes me so angry the moment that this happens, and I have to witness something like this. I just drop my head and shake it, and hopefully keep my eyes on the road. But I was also at a local pizza place here picking up a pizza, and I again was walking out, and there was a small line. And at the end of the line was this old timer, and he's wearing an N95 mask that looks like he wiped his ass with it. It's just covered in dirt and brown and muck, and he's the only one wearing a mask, and he's again attempting to breathe in this thing. It's amazing. I mean, I just wanted to rip it off his face and say, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And I should have. I mean, not ripped it off his face, but just said something like, "Take it off." No one does that. Those aren't real, they're fake. You know, I could have said 1,000 things, but I just kept walking. Yeah, I don't know. I should be more confrontational when it comes to stuff like that, perhaps. Either way, AJ sent me this story. This was from kqed.org. It was titled, "Why Masks Required Concerts Still Sell Out in the Bay Area." This was dated March 5th. I'll skim through this very quickly. Here's what it says at the beginning. It says, quote, "It's a little after 7 p.m. on a cool January night in Oakland at Wildflower Arts, an inviting new arts space with cozy thrifted sofas. Everyone in the 40-person audience has a signature look, a favorite respirator mask, that is. A white M3 Aura N95 with a decorative chain draped over the front, a neon orange KF95, a black Moldex Airwave N95 that resembles an armadillo. On a table by the door, Mask 4 Mask Bay Area displays free harm reduction supplies, including rapid antigen tests and more respirators. Many equipped with airtight valves, so concert goers can consume bar drinks through a straw without unmasking. Around the room, 4 air purifiers quietly whir. WHIRR. These people have lost their minds. They're singing, playing instruments, all wearing masks. As AJ said, it's a cult. It's an absolute cult. And a lot of these people, again, Asians, hippies, you name it. They got a picture of the, oh my God, they have a picture of the table here. They have flyers with QR codes on them. Mask up, we need you. It says, "What's up with COVID and how to protect yourself, 2024 edition." Unbelievable. It's incredibly embarrassing. Yeah, cult, no doubt. Okay, I'm going to wrap up with this one. This was a post that I reposted from X on Gab, and it got a lot of traction, and it's one hell of a story, and it has to do again with a German hospital and what a nurse is witnessing within this German hospital, specifically regarding foreigners who don't belong there. It says the following here, quote, "Nurse in Germany sends message to the world, an open letter eye-opener." They said the following, "Yesterday at the hospital, we had a meeting about how the situation here and the other Munich hospitals are unsustainable. Clinics cannot handle the number of migrant medical emergencies, so they're starting to send everything to the main hospitals. Many Muslims are refusing treatment by female staff, and we women are now refusing to go among those migrants. Relations between the staff and migrants are going from bad to worse. Since last weekend, migrants going to the hospitals must be accompanied by police with canine units. It says many migrants have ADS, I assume maybe they meant AIDS, not sure, syphilis, open TB, tuberculosis, and many exotic diseases that we in Europe do not know how to treat. If they receive a prescription to the pharmacy, they learn they have to pay cash. This leads to unbelievable outbursts, especially when it's about drugs for the children. They abandon the children to the pharmacy staff with the words, "So cure them yourselves." So the police are not only guarding the clinics and hospitals, but also the large pharmacies. We ask openly, where are all of those who welcomed the migrants in front of TV cameras with signs at train stations? Yes, for now the border has been closed, but 1 million of them are already here and we will definitely not be able to get rid of them. It says until now the number of unemployed in Germany was 2.2 million. Now it will be at least 3.5 million. Most of these people are completely unemployable. Only a minimum of them have any education. What is more, their women usually do not work at all. I estimate that 1 in 10 is pregnant. Hundreds of thousands of them have brought along infants and little kids under 6, many emaciated and very needy. If this continues and Germany reopens its border, I'm going home to the Czech Republic. Nobody can keep me here in this situation, not even for double the salary back home. I came to Germany to work, not to Africa or the Middle East. Even the professor who heads our department told us how sad it makes him to see, but worth the read, especially the cleaning women, who has cleaned, it says, every day for years for 800 euros. And then meets crowds of young men in the hallways who just wait with their hands outstretched, waiting for free. And when they don't get it, they throw a fit. I really don't need this, but I'm afraid that if I return home at some point, it will be the same in the Czech Republic. If the Germans with their systems cannot handle this, then guaranteed back home will be total chaos. They said you, who have not come in contact with these people, have absolutely no idea what kind of badly behaved desperados these people are, and how much Muslims act superior to our staff regarding their religious accommodations. It says for now the local hospital staff have not come down with the diseases these people brought here, but with so many hundreds of patients every day, of this is just a question of time. They continued and said, in a hospital near the Rhine, migrants attacked the staff with knives after they had handed over an 8-month-old on the brink of death, who they dragged across half of Europe for 3 months. The child died 2 days later, despite having received top care at one of the best pediatric clinics in Germany. The pediatric physician had to undergo surgery, and the 2 nurses are recovering in the ICU. Nobody has been punished. The local press is forbidden to write about it, so we can only inform you through email. What would have happened to a German if they had stabbed the doctor and nurses with a knife? Or if he had flung his own syphilis-infected urine into the nurse's face, and so threatened her with infection? At a minimum, he would have gone straight to jail and later to court. With these people so far, nothing has happened. And so I ask, where are all of those greeters and receivers from the train stations, sitting pretty at home enjoying their uncomplicated, safe lives? I would round up all of those greeters and bring them here first to our hospital emergency ward as attendants. Then in 1 to 2 of the buildings, housing the migrants, so that they can really look after them there themselves, without armed police and police dogs who sadly today are in every hospital here in Bavaria. It says, is this situation coming to your country? If you understand the dangerous situation that is heading your way, please share and spread this by all in any means that you have available, unquote. Again, it received 78 applies on my Gab page, and yeah, they are exactly what you would expect. Just total outrage, and rightfully so. You get what you tolerate. I don't know what else to say. I don't know how else to put it. But people have got to stop tolerating this. Can't have a hospital if everybody walks out. Organizes a hospital and leave. Again, armed guards, police dogs. What a nightmare. Not sure what else to say, other than I guess pray for those people as much as humanly possible. But Europe has fallen. I don't think there's any doubting that whatsoever. To end on a more positive note, this was making the rounds just the other day too. Health and Human Services is sending all employees a $25,000 voluntary buyout offer. And that's the agency is holding, of course, 80,000 plus employees approximately. And they were all emailed on Friday with the offer of the voluntary separation incentive payment. Excellent. My recommendation is you take it. Because if you don't, you're going to be out of a job. Same thing's happening at the Department of Education. It's happening in a lot of these three-letter agencies, and that's good news here in the States. Every country needs to be audited. No doubt about it. And watch your politicians just clam up, because they're going to get real quiet real quick. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening as always, and I will catch you on Wednesday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.